Can you hear me?
There you are, John.
There I am.
Did you get a new camera?
I have two cameras now. I got that one, and then I got this one.
Well, the new one looks really, really good picture. That one.
This one?
Yeah, it's really, really sharp.
Yeah, my kids got me two USB cameras. So I got that one, and then I got the other one there.
Mm-hmm.
And I said I would set up my hollowing arm. So I did that yesterday. Better without the light, huh?
Yeah.
This one, I can show. That.
Good. So, Arnie, I got your email about your membership.
Yeah.
I sent it on to Mike. Having you didn't happen to pay by check, did you?
What check?
The membership dues last year. You didn't pay by check, did you?
No, it was Visa over the account.
Okay, good. Checks are a pain in the ass.
Yeah, no. It went through our website.
Okay, good. Then we'll have a record of it if you made it.
Yep. Well, I've
Got
got
two records, one in PayPal and one on the website.
So yeah.
So
I think last year I joined with a check, Roger.
yeah,
Sorry for the pain in the ass.
no, it's you have to do two things when you pay by check, and if you skip any step, one you have to manually register it on the website, and obviously deposit the check. And when you register it on the website, you need to make sure you type in the right numbers and stuff. And sometimes, especially around the first year, I know when I got a lot of checks, I would forget a step or two and have to go back and correct it.
So the preferred method is to enter your card number on the website.
Yeah, you don't even need to do that. You just respond to the email that's sent to you when the renewal comes up.
Okay.
And, that's the nice thing about the Wild Apricot software we use. It has a really good financial tracking system. So every invoice, every payment, every refund is tracked through that if you use it. So that's why we try to encourage people to use it. But if not, we make a mistake, we'll fix it.
Yeah, I think I already got that email, so I'll take care of it.
Yeah, just click and pay.
I think I'm due to renew here pretty quick.
What have you guys been working on? Anything cool?
I made a salt and pepper grinder yesterday.
Good.
Walnut.
So you're building up a stock for next time we start selling?
Yeah, I mean, I had a lot of stuff for last year and didn't do any farmers markets at all. And then I had a lot of stuff for the gathering of the guilds.
Yeah. Well, that's coming up, and we just had a meeting on that, an email meeting yesterday, and we'll have a board meeting next week. But the process they're going to use is quite good and quite easy for people to participate. We can't have a gazillion people working on the website putting their stuff on it, so we have a way to funnel the data in through so people don't have to worry about that aspect. So
are you doing a virtual gathering of the guilds?
for sure, yeah.
Oh, I would be interested in trying that.
Yeah, I think it's going to be easy. It's going to be cheap, and we'll see. But yeah, get ready for it by taking good pictures. That's going to be key to selling.
Yeah, a lot of my Etsy stuff is going to expire in January, and I have a lot of pictures for that stuff. So, I get a lot of views on my Etsy site, and I sell things on Etsy too. But it seems like when I was doing the farmers markets, I was selling more on Etsy.
Okay.
So just from exposure, I would imagine.
Mm.
I think the number of people who have started selling on Etsy this last year has skyrocketed.
Oh yeah. And then, well, the other thing on Etsy is, and I don't know what other people are doing, but I saw a walnut bowl on Etsy for like $40, and it was big. I mean, it was probably 13 inches. And
Well, it may have been worth $40.
well,
Pictures hide a lot.
exactly. So, and then I saw a set of salt and pepper grinders that were like, for the salt and pepper grinder, they were like $30.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
They're not making a lot of that.
No. And then they were offering free shipping. So I don't think they're making anything.
Yeah.
And they're making sure no one else can either.
Yeah, that's the point. Is they're by doing that undercutting, they're actually making it impossible for anybody else to do it, because the people are going to look at it and say, well, why should I spend $50 or $60 on it for something that I can get for 30?
Yeah.
Right.
And that's why good photos are going to be really important, is to highlight your product, the best you can.
Yeah.
Well, I had a woman that was asking about one of my yarn bowls, and then her reply was, well, yours is $50 with free shipping, and this one over here is $25 with free shipping. And I said, well, I'm not going to sell it for any less.
And you typically get what you pay for. Most of the guys that are selling their stuff for dirtball pricing typically are not great value or great quality.
Yeah.
Well, this was
They're the
this
guys
was right
ripping them
before
out in
Christmas.
a half an hour.
What's
Yeah.
that?
They're the guys ripping them out in about a half an hour.
Oh yeah.
Well, so this was like around Thanksgiving. And then 2 weeks before Christmas, she ordered two. She ordered two different ones. So, and when I shipped it to her, and I got an email reply from her that thanks for saving her because she had ordered the $25 one and it was rough. She said it was bad.
I rest my case.
And she was pretty upset because she said it was so rough on the inside that it actually was grabbing her yarn.
Yeah.
That was,
And-
I think that gets back to Roger's point that if you have good close-ups of the product and how well the finish is, it should help.
So she ordered two of them and she was happy with both of them because I don't know how you could sell a yarn bowl that wasn't very smooth on the inside. But
Yeah. So John, do you find that the free shipping is something that a lot of people on Etsy do, or?
yeah, but the advantage though is, I adjust my price to allow for shipping because
You have
you have to, but shipping it through Etsy's site is quite a bit cheaper than shipping it at the post office.
That's correct. It's about 20% cheaper as a rule.
Yeah, I think what last year when I sold a lot on Etsy, I think it was 25 or 30% less to just ship through Etsy and print the label out. And
Yeah.
for bookkeeping and tracking, it makes it a lot easier because Etsy gives you a printout at the end of the year, and you can see how much you paid for shipping, and you can do your profit and loss a lot easier.
So how many of you guys online right now think you would participate in Gathering of the Guild show if a entry fee was like, I don't know, $50?
I would. I got nothing better to do.
Jason,
When would that be, Roger?
first week in May. Are you familiar with Gathering of the Guild?
I've been a purchaser.
Oh, I was looking at, sorry. I was looking at the wrong screen. Yeah, first.
I was gonna say 2 years ago, my wife and I attended for the very first time, and it was a very impressive show. I really liked it. In fact, yesterday I was sharing a photograph of one of the arts, one of the glass artists that had the Volkswagen motif. That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So how are we going to hear about it as attendees, Roger?
Well, as soon as we should have things finalized next week with the Gathering of the Guild board, and then well, two things. One is Northwest Woodturners could buy a booth in the Wood Guild, and then participate through that. That's a little bit out of line. Ideally, you'd be a member of the Woodworkers Guild to participate in the show. So, like Dave is a guild member.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I sold stuff a couple years ago.
and so is John. So
Yep.
I guess right now I'd have to say if you do want to, I don't have a good answer, but if you are interested, let me know.
I think maybe you misunderstood my question, Roger. I didn't mean to attend as a exhibitor, rather as
Okay.
an attendee. Just
Purchaser.
purchaser. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we're going to do a good job in advertising it, but it'll basically just be a Gathering of the Guild website that you go to, and that from there you can launch out into any of the 6 guilds that participate. So there's
Okay,
a lot
thank
of
you.
there's a lot of wood turning there. The Pacific Northwest Woodturners Guild, Tom Willing is president of, they participate and they do a lot of great business. So I don't see why Northwest couldn't do the same thing if we decide to do that and there's enough interest. But
Yeah, you don't have to necessarily be a guild by itself to buy a booth, do you?
you have to be registered as a professional member of the guild. So, so that's the way it is right now. But again, Northwest Woodturners could be. I'll just have to, if there's interest, let me know, and I'll have to figure it out. But I'd like to see it open to as many of us as we can. I'm going to show things there, and so
I would be willing to purchase a booth.
yeah.
So is it is it the type of venue where you're going to sell high-end pieces or kind of farmers market type pieces?
No, it's a very high-end show. The potters on their first day, they get a lot of people flying in from the east because they think we don't know how to price our products out here. So they buy things cheap and they take them back to the East Coast and jack them up. And normally on the first day they'll do between $300,000 and $400,000 worth of sales.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah. So it is high-end stuff.
Yeah, I would probably be interested.
Yeah, I would think so. Your stuff would fit in well. So.
I'm not quite at that level yet.
My plan last year was to have a little bit of some of the higher end pieces and then some of the middle pieces and have an assortment.
Yeah.
I found that when I did sell stuff through the Woodworking Guild, the stuff that sold was sort of the median price stuff. The real high end stuff probably didn't sell as much, and the cheap stuff didn't necessarily sell unless they were buying it for kids.
$30 to $50 seemed to be a good price range.
Yeah, that was sort of the sweet spot for most of the stuff.
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
I didn't get any questions for Turning Talk today. Anybody want to talk about something they're working on, or John has set up something for us?
I did. At the last Turning Talk, I said I would show you what my hollowing rig looks like.
Did you make that, John? Or did you buy that?
I purchased this from Simon Hope. I was getting ready to make one, but when they did the Portland AAW symposium, Simon Hope used this one as his demonstration, and then when he was ready to pack it up, he said, "Hey, do you want to buy this?" And I just told him, I said, "I'd love to buy it, but that price is out of my range today." And he made me a deal I couldn't refuse so that he didn't have to take it back to England. But the way it works, this particular, let me turn my screen so I can see what I'm showing.
Yeah, we can see it.
And then all you have to do, get to the other side. All you have to do is move this back and forth, and this articulated arm supports the end. So literally you're hollowing going like this. And it doesn't beat you up.
No, I can imagine it doesn't, and it looks like it's fairly stable because those arms are really twist resistant.
They're pretty beefy. So this particular vessel that I'm turning, the reason I picked this one to use the hollowing arm on is because it's narrower at the head than it is at the base. So when you're, and it's almost impossible to get a gouge to go back in there. If you're using a gouge, you have to come in from way back over here. But using this, I can go from a smaller neck and go straight back. And this one, I've got this one down to probably 3/8 of an inch on wall thickness. And then for this one, I set up the support here. And this takes the vibration out of this piece because I'm turning this one pretty thin.
But it's fairly long.
Yeah, it's only about 6 inches long, but I'm turning the wall so thin.
Yeah.
It's 6 inches.
Yeah.
So,
At 6 inches, that last inch is always a pain.
right out here, I was getting a lot of harmonics and vibration. So I set these two support wheels up. And if you set these things right, you can adjust the how much pressure they're putting with these. Just squeeze them.
There's just 2 wheels. It's not the 3-wheeled one, right?
Right. I have a 3-wheeled one that's homemade, but that over in the corner.
Yeah.
But for this particular one, I really only needed the 2 wheels on this side because I'm cutting against this wall.
Yeah, for sure.
If it's a bigger piece and I'm using a gouge and it's longer or a spindle, then I'll use my 3-wheeled one that I made. And I just used on my 3-wheeled one, I used inline skate wheels, the non-marking. On the first set of wheels that I had, I got off Amazon and they were cheap, and I almost set my shop on fire because one of the bearings went bad and started getting hot.
Yikes.
That's the hollowing rig I used for doing a lot of hollowing where you can't really get a gouge in there clean. And on the Simon Hope website, he says the optimal speed for this. Take a guess at what the optimal speed for using that.
I don't know, 600?
13.
Really?
Yikes.
That's
So,
good.
and this, the tool I'm using in the handle is actually one of Trent Bosch's.
Is that one with a hunter tip or is that one with a high-speed steel tip?
This is one with the high-speed steel tip.
Yeah.
And
I use the Bosch tool with a hunter tip and it works real nice. A similar setup. Yeah.
what's the difference with the hunter tip?
The carbide.
I just feel it cuts more controllably.
Is it shaped like this?
No, it's a carbide kind of a shaped carbide cutter. Small round,
it's like a cupped
small
easy
round
wood.
cutter.
It's
Yeah,
like a cupped easy wood cutter.
yeah.
Like that?
No, that's a hook. It's not like that.
I think it's just a carbide cutter, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a carbide cutter.
A round carbide cutter. Yeah. I use the same thing. What I really found in hollowing is what John has there works really good. I have an articulated arm also. It's how you start. And if you start with the Forster bit, you've got smooth sides to start working on. Then you can sort of gradually remove the wood. But if it's rough, if you got roughness in there, then that arm is captured on the bottom, but it's bouncing all over the place.
It's going to bounce because of the roughness.
Yeah. So I've just had a lot more success starting smooth with the Forster bit, and then
Right.
keeping it.
When I'm first starting, I am pushing down right here.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
But I also, when I'm finishing it, when I get down to the bottom, I use that.
Yeah.
That's more like the hunter tip.
No,
Is that
that's
the
a high,
one
that's
the
a
other
high,
way around, isn't it?
This one's a Sorby.
yeah, that's a high speed scraper.
So I'll use this one for the final cut simply because, let me switch cameras. The one thing I really like about finishing it off with this is obviously you got to watch. It's all about control, but this one has the flat spot on it.
Yeah,
So when I'm doing my finishing cut and I'm just floating it across the wood and getting a nice clean finish, this right here is very flat. And then for this one, when I'm doing the finish cut on it, I'll make sure it's far enough below center that that it does catch, so that I don't go too deep.
So it's
So
actually
it'll hit on the bottom before it cuts too much.
so you use
It's
a box.
interesting.
You use a box tool rest that goes deep inside the vessel.
Yep. When I use this,
Yeah,
This is the hunter for. trying to get
Yeah.
in there.
yeah,
It's interesting, John, that your tool, the cutter head attaches to the bottom of the tool rather than the top of the tool. I guess that wouldn't matter so much if you're making finishing cuts that are lighter,
yeah. Otherwise, it'll rip out if it gets too much of a catch.
right?
well, I can flip it over. I can flip
But then
that
you
to
lose
flip-
the flatness. Isn't it only flat on one surface?
It's flat on both sides.
Oh, it is.
Maybe you're just using it backwards.
Uh,
The curve would be wrong, wouldn't it?
Well, only if you turn in reverse. If you turn in reverse, you can flip it over.
Yeah.
right. And then I made this.
yeah. That's what. Yeah, those are handy.
What is that? Is that your bowl?
That's a box rest. This goes inside. So if I, for the tool rest, if I switch this out, then this goes inside the hollow vessel.
Did you make different length bars for that?
I
That way
did.
it's got screws?
Yep.
Nice.
I think I have, I don't know, 4 or 5 different lengths. And then this is the longest one without a bottom support. The other ones I actually have they're a T,
Mm.
so that I can go further in and not get any vibration out of the tool rest.
Very nice.
Does that take away most of your vibration?
Yeah, when I added the T, it's the same metal, but now it's a T. When I added that T for the longer one, it's pretty solid. As long as you're not taking like a gouging cut.
Right. Well, you probably better not take that kind of cut on the inside of one of these things. Just asking for trouble.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
That's why I was surprised
make
at
things exciting.
1300. That's why I was surprised at 1300. That's moving pretty quickly in there.
Well, I don't turn that at 1300 when I'm using this and I'm going that deep in. When I'm using the Trent Bosch tool, this one works great at 1300. It's really, really smooth. And you get almost no tear out. But if I'm using the scraper, I'll slow it down to about 700.
Does anyone use a captive system, hollowing system like the Jameson system?
I have a Jameson. I think he recommends a high speed too, but he turns everything fast.
Yeah. So how do you like the Jameson system?
I like it. I think maybe it takes a little more working with sometimes, especially if you have to come in at a at a sharp angle. Sometimes, you got to flip the bar around so you can get the clearance on your side, to get in, like through a small hole or something if you're trying to get a shoulder.
Yeah.
But, and I think maybe some of the articulating ones are a little easier maybe for that because you don't have to. I'm not sure because I haven't used one.
The nice thing about the capture systems is it captures the bar top and bottom and
Mhm.
won't bounce around as much.
As far as like, there was no learning curve. It was easy to set up and start hauling my first time, and I like it. The biggest thing to learn was after the first time being kind of rough, I realized if I waxed everything, it got a lot smoother.
Well, the other thing I have that I made for this one is I actually have a laser pointer arm that comes off the top. So I can set my laser so that as long as so that I know exactly where my tip is at. So I do have the
It makes it
laser
a lot
pointer.
easier
I
to
forgot.
get it smooth and get the thickness even.
It does. But you have to pay attention.
Yeah, I use a laser as well. The only limitation is where your steady rest wheel, you kind of have a little guesswork. If your steady rest is a little bit down the vessel, then you have to kind of guess where you are when you're going over the steady rest.
Oh, right.
There was one demonstrator that actually used like a GoPro camera on top and mark the screen,
right,
so he could see where his tip was, and that way he could always see exactly where it was.
Yeah, that's the Trent Bosch visualizer. Yep. I know a couple guys have those. Phil Lapp has one. Skip Burke has one.
I looked at those, and I was vacillating on buying Trent Bosch's system, but like I said, Simon Hope didn't want to take this one back to England with him, so
right. Opportunity knocks.
Exactly. And then to your point with the wheels being there, what I do is I set I have the same problem with when it crosses those wheels, you lose that
right.
visual reference. But the wheels are so far out on the vessel that I can actually see in there pretty good. So
right.
I'm not as worried about that last part where the wheels are. It's coming up to the wheels deep inside the vessel that
the smaller the opening, the bigger a challenge it is. You can't really have it close to where you can see it if you're doing a hollow urn like a burial urn or something like that.
True, but the smaller the opening, you don't have to go as deep because people can't get their hand in there.
Right. But if you're hollowing for volume, you're trying to hollow so that there's enough volume for ashes. You don't want to have it real thick. Yeah.
I saw a recommendation that you split the urn in half and then glue it back together after you're done turning it.
That's one way of doing it. Also cut the bottom off.
Yeah,
have to put a bead or something in the center to kind of hide it.
Or paint it. Or stain it so that the stain doesn't show the line as well.
I just put two YouTube videos on chat that shows a low-cost version of Trent Bosch's thing. All you need is a inexpensive Amazon camera and iPad.
Is that your setup?
Yeah. We had a short article in the newsletter, I don't know, maybe a year ago or so, but the concept is really simple. And, once you figure it out, it's like, geez, why didn't everyone figure that out? But pretty clever guy. So speaking of
well,
hollowing,
the laser system I set up, I can also use that on my coring. I made it so that it fits on my coring set too.
Yeah. So speaking of hollowing, anyone do any thin hollowing lately?
Any what?
Really thin hollowing, like piercing type thin.
I did one last week that, well, I was just experimenting. It was my first intentional attempt to get down to 1/8 of an inch wall thickness. And I actually got down to a 16th on one of them. That was a bit of a challenge.
I was gonna say that gets a rather vibrating.
It was. It was definitely. But I used the same wheel support that John was using, and that helped.
How big of a piece were you trying to hollow?
It was about 8 inches deep.
Oh, wow. Okay.
This one that's on my lathe right now, the wood on it has almost no figure to it. It's maple, but it's pretty much just a straight piece of maple with no figuring. So I was thinking about that yesterday, whether I wanted to turn it down real thin and then do a piercing. But I think I decided I'm going to do the wood burning on this.
I tell you, if you're doing piercing, let me tell you, small is good.
This here's about a 16th wall thickness, but it's also really open on the end. Goblet pen.
Oh yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Wasn't too bad.
So I'm experimenting with multi-axis turnings for fishing lures. This is one
nice.
of my initial efforts. I've never airbrushed, and I went and bought an airbrush, and I'm experimenting a little bit with that. This one's kind of a tadpole shape. It's got a lead in the bottom of it right here, so it's supposed to maintain its orientation and wobble through the water. But unfortunately, the head is a little bit big in proportion to the weight, so this one tends to tumble and corkscrew like that, which is suboptimal.
Well, actually, that might attract the fish faster.
Well, you'd have to have a really good swivel system so you don't get so much line twist.
I was going to say that
it just isn't. This one doesn't work so well. I like the paint job though, but
that looks great.
Yeah, and
whose airbrush did you get?
Pardon me?
Whose airbrush did you get?
I got the Pache airbrush, a Talon.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I'm trying different shapes. For example, this one's a more classic Minos shape. I cut the taper initially on a bandsaw, and then I put it on the lathe. This is a fixed axis here. This one's set on two different axes, one that's offset below to cut that top surface so it curves more than the lower surface. And then it's got aluminum tape that's used for duct work that I use to make the silver side, and I put that on a wood table, and I use one of those mesh nylon bags like you can buy vegetables in, and I would lay that over the top and rub it with a spoon, and it gives kind of a rough scale surface. I don't know if you could see that.
Yeah.
And then the lip is polycarbonate, and then you paint usually dark on the top and light on the bottom, and then you can put different colors, translucent colors over the side to make different effects.
So are you using dyes or paint?
Pardon me?
Are you using dyes or paint for the colors?
Acrylic paints, and then I cover with thin epoxy that's designed for tabletops and such, and I'll paint the epoxy on, and then I put it on a barbecue rotisserie, and it rotates so that evens out the epoxy as it turns and dries.
Oh, cool.
That's a good
The lathe
idea.
was a little fast. The slowest I could get the lathe to run was like 40, and I'd probably have epoxy everywhere if I run it at 40. I didn't want to be glued to my lathe with 5-minute epoxy, so this is another one. This one's kind of a conical shape. You can see the lead is glued in. I haven't painted this one yet. So I'm working on, different shapes. Here's a different shape. This one has a flat beveled surface. Again, the weight in the bottom, so hopefully it'll tumble or waggle like that.
Are you casting your own weights, or are you buying them and putting them in?
I have some lead, and I went down to Goodwill and bought some old spoons, and I melt the lead in a spoon and pour it into the drilled out opening.
Okay. Because that's the idea of making fishing lures to sell either on Etsy or at the guild or at the gathering of the guilds might be sort of an interesting challenge.
Yeah.
I've got actually a ladle that's designed to do put the lead into one side. It's actually got the way to keep the dross out of it as you pour.
Right. They have some cool lead pourers that you can buy. I know you can buy them at Fisherman's Marine for $100, but I haven't decided.
My dad, he had it.
I haven't decided if I'm into it for $100 yet. We'll see.
So
So this one's more of a quick fish shape, smaller.
how are you checking these, Steve?
Between centers, and then I cut off the waste wood off the end.
So all the curves are doing.
So all the curves are done on the lathe. So
between centers by offsetting one end.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You normally offset the tailstock, right?
It varies. Depends, depends on where I want best access and how coordinated I feel regarding a sloping curve to the left versus right. I tend to shape better with my right arm, being right hand dominant. So a lot of times the big curve will be going down towards the headstock for me.
Okay.
It's a great use of small pieces of wood.
I'm sitting here looking at this and going, I got a box of stuff that's too short for pen blanks, but fat enough that it might make some really interesting fishing lures.
People use balsa. Of course, you can't turn balsa. There's shred for you, but I use poplar, and the poplar's nice. It sands nice. It turns nice.
And it's inexpensive.
It's inexpensive. Good deal. So we'll see how that goes. Just something to play with. Combining my hobbies.
So does steelhead like a certain lure?
I'm not much of a steelhead fisherman. I'm hoping to get something like this and maybe bigger that I can go offshore with skip and fish for salmon.
Oh, okay. But do certain fish respond to certain lures differently?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of them are fairly predatory. If you piss them off, they'll go after it. Yeah. Between territoriality and predation, you can usually get them to move on something.
Steve, glow in the dark pigment to go on those.
Right. There's some UV paints. There's fluorescent paints. So
your epoxy thing, I just did this week. This is a piece of cherry that I embedded in epoxy. I had a thing of epoxy that I've had for probably longer than I should have. And then I ordered some epoxy and they screwed up my order and sent me way more than I needed. So, but this is a piece of cherry that I've had it there, but it was cracked and I was afraid it was going to blow apart. So I just embedded the whole thing in epoxy, and then I'm just going to turn it down and see what it looks like. But I put this in a pressure tank.
I was going to say, I was going to wonder if you were putting it in a pressure tank.
Yeah, I did. And
get the bubbles out.
Yeah, actually, it did a pretty good job.
So it was a pressure tank, not a vacuum tank.
Right. So the reason why I went pressure rather than vacuum is quite simply, if you're going to put it under a vacuum, you got to leave your vacuum pump running for probably 4 or 5 hours.
Ooh.
Because I didn't know what I did try to put that under a vacuum at one point, but as the epoxy is curing, it's expanding and releasing heat. So I couldn't hold the vacuum unless I left my vacuum pump running.
So why do you have to leave it running for 4 or 5 hours? It seems like it would extract the air from the piece and the bubble, it would run to the top, and then you could shut the pump off and let it cure.
Well,
Outgassing of the curing process is where you need to keep it running.
right, because well, when you put it under a vacuum
Right?
and you draw all the bubbles out,
Uh-huh.
as soon as you release that vacuum, everything goes back in.
Yeah, the theory is.
Well,
is
not if the bubble's risen to the top of the epoxy and is popped, then it's not
Yeah,
going to
the
go back into the
theory is
piece.
the bubbles coming out, the resin goes in, or the epoxy goes in to replace where that air was. The problem is that that process doesn't necessarily work. I don't know. Ask Mike. He did a video on that.
So the epoxy may be too thick for that. Maybe that cactus
Why are
juice
you
that
putting
they sell.
epoxy under a vacuum?
No, that was
Get
the
the air.
question.
If you're wanting to get the air bubbles out from around an irregular piece,
Yeah,
and you're setting it in epoxy rather than another resin,
if you set it in epoxy, the working time is so much longer with epoxy than with aluminite. You can degas it, but you can also just take a torch and pop the bubbles as they come out. You know, the aluminite.
Right. Well, for what I did, it was in a, I put it in a plastic jug and then submersed that. And I had to weight it down because it kept wanting to float out of the epoxy.
Yeah.
And then I just put it under a pressure because the working time is pretty long and I didn't want to use a vacuum and leave my vacuum pump running for that long.
How much pressure, John?
Well, I wanted to get it up to 50, but the relief valve on this one I bought from Harbor Freight is set at 40. It's set at 40. And
it goes off to 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just ordered an adjustable pressure relief. The tank is rated for 60. I'd like to get it to 50.
Okay, what are you're trying to force epoxy around an irregular piece of wood?
Yeah, John, he wasn't on when you showed it. Go ahead and show him again.
Oh,
Regular piece of cherry.
A regular piece of cherry, but it had a lot of cracks and voids in it, and I was afraid it was going to blow apart. And I had some extra epoxy, so I took a plastic jug.
Yeah, I see.
And I submersed it, and then I had to weight it down because this thing
will float the epoxy.
Was trying to float, and then I put it in a pressure tank to force the epoxy all the way into the cracks and stuff, and to either force the air out or make the air bubbles so small you can't see them.
So now what are you going to do with it?
Well, now I'm going to turn it.
into what?
I don't know.
Yeah.
So you were just trying to fill the cracks, and
more or less,
and took the grand approach to it.
It's a solid piece of wood.
Yeah.
No, not hollowed out.
Not yet.
Okay, not to looking at that, what I saw, that piece of wood. Now you can do it any way you want. This is just the way I would have done it. It's not the way. I would have built little tape dams on each crack, and then just poured the epoxy and let it set up in that crack and move on to another one, instead of trying to epoxify the entire. Is that a word?
So I tried to do that on this crack right here. That's what I did here. But the problem was that I was getting air bubbles. And even though I heated it with a heat gun, there's air bubbles in that.
Yeah, epoxy is sort of, if you see people making these river tables, they're very popular now.
Yeah.
Very cool looking with the epoxy. You notice they take the torch, but that's a big flat area.
Right.
You got lots of surface area for bubbles to pop out.
They also, when they mix the epoxy, when you stir it up, you're stirring in bubbles. And so they'll put the epoxy in a vacuum chamber, pull the bubbles out, and then release it, let the pressure back in, and do that maybe 3 times. And once you've evacuated all the bubbles, then you've got a solid liquid that has no bubbles in it.
Or not very many anyway.
Or the really small ones,
As soon as you open it back to the atmosphere, it'll start to take up What's the
So-
open time on the epoxy you're using?
On this particular epoxy, you got like an hour.
Okay.
But I did an epoxy pour on the extension table on my table saw. I put a router in my table saw and I epoxy poured that top. And that came out, somebody was out to the shop the other day and
I was out there. You were
That's
showing
right.
it to me.
I mean, that came out pretty good and I'm working on a table.
Yeah,
The
see,
epoxy I used for
that's that
this-
ideal application of epoxy. That's that big flat surface. It's like the bar top epoxy.
That's what it is.
That's what it's made to do.
Yeah, it's designed to flow and even out, and the surface area is such that you can get all of the bubbles out of it.
Yeah.
Self-leveling.
Under a torch or whatever. Yeah.
But at that cure time, it's not intended to be very thick. So the deep core epoxies, they have like a pot time of, a cure time of like 72 hours.
Yeah. There's
They take
24
hours before it even starts to gel.
Yeah. There's some
And that-
24-hour ones that work real well.
And that leaves plenty, it's a lot more viscous, so it'll flow in and allow bubbles to come up on its own. And it'll give you the time for the bubbles to come up completely on their own.
So I'm doing a Purple Heart table that I'm doing an epoxy top on after I did the extension table on my table saw. I did that just to practice. And that came out pretty good. So the large areas are different. The epoxy I used for this is a different brand epoxy than I used for the tabletops. And I had this epoxy for well over 2 years, and it was getting to the point where I either had to use it or throw it away. So the whole reason I embedded that piece of cherry in there is because I either had to try something with that epoxy or throw it away. And I've never turned an epoxy poured piece before. I've seen it on YouTube, and my guess is it's messy.
Yeah, get ready for a minute.
I was going to say, from what I've seen, it looks extremely messy, and the carbide is actually a good thing there because the epoxy does a better job with scraping as opposed to cutting.
Right.
Right.
And the epoxy is a lot more brittle than aluminite, for example. So it's more like turning acrylic than turning aluminite, but it'll scrape just fine.
So if I want to color epoxy tape, what's the best type of dye to use?
There are epoxy dyes that you can get specifically to color epoxy. There are aluminite dyes, which I think will work just fine with epoxy also.
I have a bunch of them.
Yeah.
Most
do you get
people
those?
use the like mica powders. That's what gives it that shimmery color.
Right.
And you see it kind of looks like it's billowing clouds within the epoxy.
Right.
That's from a powder suspended in the epoxy rather than something like a trans tint dye.
Have you used those? I've seen those. I'm thinking about using it, but have you used
Well,
one?
you can tint the epoxy if you want a background for your clouds. You know, if you want a blue sky and white clouds, you get a blue background and you take the white. What's that called? It's the powder
Yeah.
that I've got 3 dozen bottles of. Yeah.
But if you
So
want something like a swirling color, like you
Yeah.
see people.
Yeah. Then you mix that up as a second batch, and then you swirl that through after you've got your solid background. It's it's sort of like painting.
This one is drops. This one is a liquid form. And when I do the spiral edge on the bowl and I put the epoxy in it of different colors and sometimes I put glitter in it because my granddaughter likes glitter. I'll use the drops because the color becomes more consistent. And then for other things, when I'm, because I use epoxy to fill in things as an accent more. I've never used it for a full pour like this. But then these are the mica powder that Jason was talking about.
Yeah.
These give a different look than the drops.
Well, yeah, the powders are not meant to color the epoxy. They're meant to be an accent within the epoxy.
Yeah. Right. So it doesn't, you can actually tell, and that's what Jason, I think, was trying to say, is that the mica powder gives it a different look because it's suspended in the epoxy, whereas the drops color the whole epoxy?
Yeah, one is a it diffuses and one is suspended, and they're two different looks. Um, the shimmer is more of the suspended as opposed to the uniform coloring that the drops would give you.
And then for my birthday last week, my granddaughter got me a bunch of mica powder that's fluorescent. It glows in the dark.
So you're gonna make stuff for her that glows in the dark, huh?
Oh yeah. So she got, and they're all very, very vivid pastel colors.
Oh, fun.
So,
She doesn't believe in doing anything subtly.
oh no. She's 10. And
See,
so
this is what the drops without the powders will do. Just a tinted resin.
right.
If you
That's
put
the
in-
one you used for making that one there. That blue one looks like the one you used for the not that one, the other one. Looks like the one you used for the video.
Oh, it might have been. You can see you got the white cloudy powder in there. Let's see. You can see a little better on that one.
Cool.
Yeah, and you can use white, any of the colors. They're fun. They're it's kind of like painting, you know. You just kind of, what do you want and where does that put it? Anyway.
Right. So they gave me an Amazon gift card so I could, and I was talking to my granddaughter and told her I was going to order these ones. And she said, oh, that's exactly what I wanted you to get. So I got to make something for her and use the glow in the dark.
Oh, that's cool stuff. I've played with that. It does work.
I mean, it's not that expensive.
You just leave it clear with just a touch of yellow and it makes it gold. This is a black locust burl sphere.
So, and you pressure pot those to when you're curing them, or do you?
Yeah, with a Lumilite, which is what this is, you do that under pressure for the same reason we were talking about. It's an exothermic reaction. It gives off bubbles. It gives off heat. But if you put it under 60 pounds of pressure, the bubbles never really get out during the time that it sets up. And it's got about an hour.
See, I would probably only take mine up to 50. It's rated for 60.
Yeah, if 50 will do, just 40 will do just fine.
A 40 actually did pretty good.
When I turn on my compressor, it gets to 60 before I can actually turn it off. So
well,
you don't have the ability to dial the vent.
yeah, but that means reaching down and changing the settings that work for everything else. So I just turn it off real quick.
So in that sphere you showed, Mike, how'd that start out?
It started out as a cylinder, and in the mold, I just sort of epoxied the pieces of black locust burl in place. I haven't finished the top yet. I'll do that one of these days.
looks
Just
really
hold it
good.
in place with hot glue, and then turn the sphere.
So now do you make your molds out of like plastic of some form?
Get plexiglass. When I closed down my lab, I had sheets of plexiglass, and I figured anything that I bought was mine when I left. So I should have taken more.
This is great. Could I ask a question about chambers?
Yes.
I have a vacuum chamber about the size of a crock pot, and I want to have a vessel to do things that are longer and maybe even narrower. And I was thinking about going to Goodwill and getting like a glass lasagna dish where, you know, it's 1/8 inch or 3/16 thick, and then getting a sheet of plexiglass for a top. Of course, I'll need to make a gasket for it, but and then drilling the plexiglass lid, not the vessel, but the lid for a fitting. Does that sound problematic to anyone?
This is for vacuum or
For vacuum, yeah, yes.
vacuum? Glass works pretty well.
I think the biggest problem you're going to have with that is I think that the pan would work fine, but the lid, because it would cover such a wide span, you would have to have an extremely rigid covering for it to not bow. And if you use something like plexiglass and you drill it, you're going to have some potential failure point there by the time you put that much bow and strain on it. So that would
That's
be.
that's a good point. I was probably thinking of only like 3/16
no,
acrylic,
no.
but that
Oh,
would
no, no,
probably
no.
fail.
Now,
I bought a,
the vacuum
I bought a-
chambers that I bought that have plexiglass tops have 1-inch plexiglass across
Right.
the top.
Yeah, I was gonna say
And
you need
it's
about
not that
3.
expensive, you know.
Yeah.
So
Christopher's holding up one. Christopher,
Okay.
you're muted.
I have a commercial stainless vacuum vacuum chamber, and its glass lid is about 1 inch thick. It's super heavy and sturdy. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Chris,
this guy right here is about a 1/2 inch thick, and it's got the vacuum gauge on top of it. And this is just for like a 6-inch diameter container, and it's really thick. So if you were gonna cover a lasagna pan, you'd probably want to go with 1.5 inches thick or something just really stout. But then I'd be worried about the backside of the glass of the lasagna pan.
if it's got
That's a lot of pressure in the middle of that glass, and it could break.
I think
Most
it has
glass,
a scratch, it'll blow, even if it's Pyrex.
yeah,
yeah,
You could turn it
most-
on and run.
yeah.
Tell your
The-
least
the
favorite
better
kid to
way-
turn it on.
The better way to go with, if you wanted something long, would be a long cylinder, because
Yeah.
then you're not going to have any broad flat surfaces that are going to be as problematic.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you could do like a pipe of some form with ends on it.
Okay, yeah, and those are pressure rated. So
So are you doing an epoxy, or are you doing something like cactus juice?
cactus juice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing. I don't know firsthand, but I did a lot of reading, and plexiglass and acrylic are not they don't work well with the cactus juice.
Cactus juice will eat it.
Yeah, it'll
Some
weaken.
of some of the stuff you see on Amazon says not rated for cactus juice.
Yeah.
I just assumed that it says that because it has no laboratory has tested it and given it an official thumbs up, but I could be absolutely wrong.
Let's
It might be
ask the chemist.
That might be a CYA. I use plastic containers for cactus juice all the time. If you saw that video that I did about making the stoppers and casting and stabilizing,
Yeah.
that's a plastic bacterial growth chamber that's lasted now 20 years. So
I saw plenty of people who have done it and been fine, but I saw enough firsthand experiences that where it started to spider web and get micro cracks and then eventually imploded. So I
Yeah.
decided to stay away from it.
and that can be as much the vacuum as the cactus juice, because vacuum is extremely powerful. You know, it's
So, to your point, I had thought about converting my pressure tank into a vacuum chamber, but I haven't done the math yet, but I don't think that it's rated for the internal pressure. I don't know that I don't know how many inches of vacuum equal 40 psi.
Not a lot.
So I didn't do it because I'm afraid I'm going to implode it.
40 psi would
In a
be
bit.
roughly 2
Have fun.
atmospheres, or 1.5 atmospheres. So what is that? That's roughly 30 inches of mercury, 20 inches of mercury. 20, about 23 inches of mercury.
I think it's safe to say this is not the place where you want to save a few pennies.
nope.
Okay. If
Now,
anyone's
With your pressure pot, it's not going to shatter like a glass container would.
That'll just
That's
crack.
true.
It'll just crumple.
So it broke
I
the seal
wouldn't-
and released the vacuum. Yeah.
And actually,
I
I
won't
had-
use glass. I wouldn't. Me personally, I wouldn't use glass because if there's a micro fracture in that glass,
Yeah.
you're not going to see it.
if anyone's in the market for plastic. It was maybe 10 years ago. Our dear friend from the Guild, Bob Oswald, had a short article that he found a place on the west side called Multicraft Plastic, sold for a fair bit cheaper than tap plastics. So just keep that place in mind.
Everyone is cheaper than tap plastics.
Oh, okay.
What was that name?
Multicraft, one word, Multicraft Plastics. And
Thank you.
I've bought from them before, and if you bring in like a stencil or like a paper drawing with an outline in pencil, they'll cut it to fit what you need.
Really?
Yeah.
Do they do inch plus thickness?
I once bought about an inch thick. It was really beefy, but I can't promise it was more than an inch.
No, but we're talking about putting a top on a pipe or something like that. An inch might be really, it's over engineering it a little bit.
Yeah, but who cares if it's only a small, hockey puck or something?
6-inch circle, who cares?
Right.
What's that? Over engineering? I've never heard of that.
As an engineer, that's a term we use, which means we over design it to ensure that it will, at designed use and plus 10%, it's still going to be well within the margins.
Nowadays, you have to over engineer because once you submit it, it's going to be value engineered.
I see lots of engineers, and I can't say that any of them are guilty of overthinking things.
Dave, I was being sarcastic. Dave, I was being sarcastic. I am an engineer also.
Okay, over engineering is a term that used to be around. Nowadays, they don't even use it.
If a glass
You over engineer because the undercut bidders are gonna use shortcuts.
Yep. And or the idiot's going to use the idiot end user is going to use it in ways that are not designed, like a 40 psi tank at 100 psi,
or a 40 psi tank under -1 atmosphere.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I would have been an engineer too, but those classes those guys have to take are really difficult.
It depends on your point of view.
That's the weed out process to keep the people in the profession.
It was the trigonometry that turned me away from engineering. I thought for sure as a kid I was going to be an engineer. Then I hit sine, cosine, and tangent and made a right turn.
Now wait until you get to multiple integrals. That becomes fun.
Well, I took a business-based calculus class that was the calculus without the trigonometry. Easy A. It was sine, cosine, and tangent that just didn't work in my brain.
Yeah, well, become an electrical engineer, you can't get around it.
Well, then after high school, I became a machinist, and I got chewed out once because I didn't remember how to use it, and then I just figured out how to use the computer to figure out all my angles and never asked again.
So I have a question.
I had to be an engineer because I couldn't do English.
I can't either, John. Steven's got a question.
So this piece of wood was in my garage labeled cherry burl, and I finished turned it and was able to keep the bark on, but the bark doesn't look like cherry to me.
And
It
It looks
doesn't.
more like maple.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
It looks like cherry. I recently turned several pieces from someone had an ornamental cherry in their yard, and below the graph it was a very rough bark like that. It wasn't what you think of as like that paper bark.
Right.
Cherry.
Right. Okay. Well, the wood looks more like cherry, but
Which
the
one
bark
can you get more
didn't
money
look-
for?
Pardon me?
Which one can you get more money for?
Probably cherry.
Maple or cherry?
Only
We're back.
but I'm giving it away.
hearing.
You know me, I'm giving it away for free.
You say we're back around to the Etsy store.
There
Yeah,
you go.
Really.
It looks nice.
Thanks. So I'll keep it labeled cherry, I guess.
I don't think anyone's going to challenge you on it.
Cool.
Okay, guys. Interesting hour. Anyone else have anything you want to wrap up on?
So I'm back to working on these spheres that I've been doing. I got another order for 10 more of them.
Wow.
Still having a heck of a time finding material big enough to do these. So if anyone has an idea for material in the like to do like a 9-inch diameter sphere, that is, it doesn't have to be totally dry because he doesn't mind cracks. This was redwood and it was pretty dry and it still is cracking. But if anyone has any material that you think would work for that, let me know.
Jason, I
You
think
laminate?
Jason,
He doesn't want laminated. He wants single pieces.
Hmm.
I think I've got a couple pieces of what I think is either red or white oak sitting in the truck of my sitting in my truck right now that I got. Somebody had cut the tree down about 2 weeks ago. Haven't sealed the ends on it, but you're welcome to have it.
Yeah, I can get plenty of green wood. It's trying to find something that's at least mostly dry. That's what's really difficult.
You almost need to find something standing dead that was just cut down that's been drying out a bit for a couple years.
Or find something.
I'm wondering if you could put it under a vacuum and pull the water out.
You got to have a pretty good setup to do that. I've looked into it.
Yeah.
Michael's laughing.
Yeah. Well, because yeah, don't ask me how I know that's not such a good idea.
It's
Other
not
than
just
you
the
probably
vacuum.
tried it.
When you're in a vacuum, it's very difficult to get any form of heat to it.
Yeah.
Especially if it's not something like
to it
flat
expands
board.
the air, so your heat is counteracting your vacuum. So
Or if there's no air there, you can't transmit the heat through the air. You have to have direct contact.
Or you have to have radiant.
How big of
Which has to be direct contact.
how big a piece do you need, Jason?
Big enough to get at least an 8-inch diameter sphere out of.
So
you got to have a side that's 8 inches. You can't take the pith.
Right. So I
That's
got
a
a
pretty good sized tree.
pickup load of more redwood, but it was just cut down a couple weeks ago, so that's going to be pretty moist.
It'll be ready in 2 decades.
I have a chunk of birch that might work for you. I'll measure it when we hang up and let you know.
All right.
I might have. I think I've got one. I don't think it's. No, it's 6 inches. It's not 8.
okay, everyone. Well, thanks for your time this morning. And you'll notice I put the links up on the website for the last meeting, and the turning talk will be up there shortly. Everyone have a good weekend.
You too.
You too, Roger.
Hey, Roger,
Yeah,
did you say your brother was 85 when he had his knee replacement?
yeah, Monday.
Yikes. He's my hero.
We'll see how the next year goes for him.
Hey, Roger,
could
did
be
you
a-
ever hear back on the thing you were looking at from the tool exchange?
Remind me.
The turning tools.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, he's picking them up tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, everyone, take care.
All right.
All right, bye.